thank you, John, for being here. Really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. For those of you who don't know me, my name is John Hauser, and I'm the Deputy County Attorney at our County Attorney's Office. County Attorney's Office has a wide and rich portfolio of work, but one of the things that I do is track legislation between January and April of every year when our state legislature is in session. And usually part of that job is reading bills, looking for bills that are likely to have an impact on county government. So either a new duty we will have to perform or some new cost we will have to absorb, or rarely money we will be given by the state that we were not planning on, although that's an increasingly short supply these days. For about 3 years, Commission on Aging has also asked me to periodically come maybe once or twice during the session and just see what bills I could find that are of interest or might be of interest to seniors, and to just answer any questions you all might have or go to ground on any bills you've heard about and would like to learn more of. The list I always come up with is never complete, since this isn't my bread and butter, but I'm happy to do it. Top level summary of the General Assembly this year. We've had about 2,602 bills filed. I have a list of 11 of them that Rowena grew to 12 as of 5 minutes ago, with one that she found actually a pretty big one and might be the one you're all most interested in. Far and away, the biggest issue this session has seen the state deal with is the state's fiscal outlook. You won't see that directly show up in any of the bills I've mentioned, and I have a handout here of the bills I identified that I'm happy to email out to you all after. But quick and dirty on the budget is we are facing about a $3.3 billion shortfall at the state level that the General Assembly has been at loggerheads trying to figure out how to deal with. There have been a lot of kind of attempts at a plan to be made. Nothing holistic or complete has been put forward yet. There was a framework of a deal announced last week that looks like it is going to solve for at least this year the legislature's requirement to balance a budget. That's going to be a combination of cuts at the state level, some shifts in costs from the state to the counties, and some what Annapolis euphemistically calls revenue enhancements, which is short for increased taxes, fees, or other assessments to bring more money into the state. Again, we are still waiting for that deal to be made public and full, but it looks like they're going to be able to pass a budget on time this year. And again, I can't, in that 3.3 billion shortfall, I haven't been able to identify anything as of yet that directly impacts seniors as separate from any other population in the state. There are some things that we're all going to have put on our shoulders, seniors and non-seniors alike. For those of us fortunate to be making $750,000 or more per year, you are going to see an increase of about 0.75 to 1%, depending on just how much money you're making, to your income tax rates. The rest of us are also going to see a 20% increase in Maryland's standardized deduction, so that might help some. There's going to be a capital gains surcharge of, I think, about 2.5% on capital gain profits more than $350,000. That might affect some people if you have to liquidate a particularly large section of your retirement portfolio all at once. But as far as income tax changes go, don't really identify much in the mix there for seniors. We will probably all feel the hurt in a 3% increase or 3% service tax that is going to be assessed against digital services and kind of cloud-based computing. So if any of us subscribe to iCloud storage to back up all the pictures of our photos or our videos that we keep on our camera, that is going to have a 3% surcharge added to it now if the current draft of the budget goes through. That's going to affect consumers and businesses alike. It is probably going to have a disproportionate effect on businesses because they have heavy IT consulting and cloud computing costs. It is likely you will see some of those costs being transferred down to the consumers one way or the other. But that's the biggest tax increase that is out there. The other thing you're going to see is a jump in the vehicle excise tax from 6 to 6.8%, a doubling in the registration fees from $100 to $200 for your vehicle registrations, and maybe this is a Well, no, because even this, mostly this, you'll also see a change to vehicles that are eligible for historic tags. I think the current law is that any vehicle at least 20 years old gets to be named a historic vehicle and get the tags and preferential kind of registration rates for that. Going forward, it will only be any vehicle, purchased or manufactured after 1999. And that is the budget outlook right now. That is still kind of rumor, hearsay, and suspicion. We did have House leadership, Senate leadership, and the governor all announced together last year that what I just went through is the rough framework. So we're not expecting too many big changes from that, but it is still subject to change because we still have not gotten a budget bill out of even one chamber of the legislature yet. And we're expecting it to come out of the House either today or tomorrow, but you might still see some play at the margins on the budget there. As far as specific bills to go through, I'm not going to go through all 12 that I have. I'll pull out some of them that are interesting or that might have caught people's attention. First, I saw it on Facebook, it made the rounds and it got some attention. There will be an increase in the consolidated senior sport fishing license. Currently, seniors can, for I think a whole $4 or $5 a year, get a consolidated senior sport fishing license. That I think the 3-4 different types of sport fishing licenses you can get in the state. Senior citizens, which this bill defines to be those 62 years or older, can get one consolidated license for a much reduced cost. That much reduced cost is going to increase from $5 a year to $12 a year. This is a bill that has passed both the House and Senate. So that is likely to, that is almost certain to see passage. We just need one of the houses now to adopt the amendments the other house gave. The other thing is that the consolidated senior sport fishing license is losing its trout fishing privileges. So if a senior wants to catch trout, they will have to go and get the separate trout fishing license on top of that. They offer policy justifications for that. First, they say that it's been quite some time since this fee was updated. I can't give you an exact date, but I can tell you that they did peg it to $12 per year, is adjusted for inflation, what that $5 a year would have been whenever it was first passed. The trout fishing provision is solely because apparently our trout fishing restocking fund is in dire fiscal straits, and they just think that while we'd love to do it, I assume, they just need the revenue to try and feed money to go into that specific trout replenishment fund. Again, put that in there, not because I think it'll be of interest to seniors who do recreationally fish, I'm sure. It also did get a lot of attention early in the year when they talked about 250% increases in the senior fishing license fee. That is true. It is going up to 5 years or $5 a year, $12 a year, but thought that might be something folks heard about or have an interest in. Another bill that I saw, HB 158, SB 223, the Senior Call Check and Social Connections Program. This is something they're pursuing at the state level, where there is existing the Senior Call Check Service and Notification Program, which I understand to be a program where the Maryland Department of Aging or a local designee, be it a local Department of Aging or Office on Aging or a nonprofit Department of Aging, State Department of Aging, chooses to delegate this duty to, operates a call center where seniors can sign up to basically get regular notice kind of correspondence of alerts, emergency announcements, or other kind of dry kind of public service announcements like this. This bill, which has passed both the House and Senate with amendments, we're just waiting for final concurrence, would expand that program and retitle it into the Senior Call Check and Social Connections Program, and would broaden the bill to include authorizing the Maryland Department of Aging to have folks make regular calls to senior citizens, to have, quote, regular direct communication with them to promote wellness and purposeful social engagement. Exactly what that means or how frequent those calls or text messages or emails or other forms of communication would be, they don't go into that. Just that this would be an expansion of that program, and that the Maryland Department of Aging would be authorized to start spending money that is now being spent on the call check service and notification program to these wellness checks and these social connections calls as well. Looks like they've only got 500,000 in the fund to work with this year, so I don't know how many calls we're gonna see on that, but they are broadening the program to include that. I'll put this one on there just because I mentioned it this year and it's always a fun one. HB 190/SB 181, correctional services, geriatric and medical parole. Seniors do not go on a crime spree late, right away. Because this bill would allow, we saw this last year and it got a little bit of a chuckle because I don't know how many geriatric defendants we have up there, but for those who qualify, pardon me, I don't know the minimum age for it. But this bill would basically give the Maryland Parole Commission extra authority to take in consideration an inmate's kind of age or state of well-being when it comes to weighing parole. It's kind of a plus factor that they would now be obligated to consider. It does not automatically equate to everybody over 80 or over 75, whatever the cutoff age they would go to, walks out of jail. There would still be the analysis and the benefit or the balancing to do. It's just something they would put in there and would have to look at. This bill, unlike last year, has actually gotten through one house. It has passed the Senate with amendments. We'll see if it can make it through the House or not. This bill is coupled with medical considerations as well, which are historically much more controversial and hard to get through or looked at skeptically by the legislature than just geriatric parole. But did include that for your all's interest. I'll skip over. We've got a bill that looks like we'd pass that would increase penalties or create a specific crime for financial exploitation of vulnerable and senior adults. So you've got your garden variety theft and fraud laws right now that would obviously apply in those situations. That bill would create a special criminal class with basically enhanced penalties for those who are caretakers or fiduciaries or people in a confidential relationship with an elderly or vulnerable family member and take advantage of their access to that elderly family members or elderly ward's money and use it fraudulently for their own benefits. HB 71/SB 66 on the Accessible and Expedited Voting Act of Maryland has passed the House, has not passed the Senate. It would require the State Board of Elections to establish guidelines for our local boards of elections to follow. That would create a process to expedite voting for elderly voters and voters with disabilities at each early voting center and polling place, and would require local boards to implement those guidelines. I don't think before the 2026 elections, but at least by the next presidential election in 2020, if it passes. Other one I saw, the Safe Staffing Act of 2025, which has passed the House but not the Senate, would require hospitals licensed in the state to establish and implement a clinical staffing committee and to create kind of a comprehensive staffing plan for that hospital to make sure that they have enough staff to meet their needs, that schedules line up such that they won't face a critical lack or an acute lack of staff at any given moment. That would require those staffing acts to be online and operational by January 1st of 2027. HB 94, a bill that relates to electrical cooperatives when they want to increase their rates for their ratepayers have to pay. I know that the state AARP identified affordability of electrical bills and the increase in rates as a key issue the AARP was going to focus in on this year. Most of those bills I looked at have not passed, do not seem likely to at this juncture. This bill, though, from our own Delegate Crosby, is one bill that's passed the House, may make it out of the Senate yet. It would apply to an institution like SMECO, which is an electrical cooperative, wouldn't forbid them from raising their rates, would make it more difficult for them to raise their rates than it is already. But what it would require is that they would have to give out enhanced notice and hold a public hearing prior to pursuing that rate increase with Public Service Commission. So that's a little bit more of a heads up and a little bit more visibility to not just senior citizens, but all ratepayers in SMECO, if that bill does in fact pass. Next on this list, HB 1328, SB 926, another one that came up last year and repeated itself this year, the End of Life Option Act. This bill also does not appear likely to pass this year, just like it hit difficulties in passage last year. But I thought put it on the list this year because, again, it is one of those bills that is always dramatic, it is always controversial, it always gets in the headlines. Figured that members who are plugged into the legislation might solve this. Also, just useful to know that the General Assembly, it still has its proponents, but in short, this bill would have authorized an individual who suffers from a terminal illness or is in a state where expiration and past, like they will die. Won't sugarcoat it any more than that. It is almost a certainty that they will pass in the imminent future from this bill, that they would at that point be authorized to seek the assistance from a medical provider if they choose to make the decision to terminate their life before natural causes would take them. This bill would have given them that option. Again, this bill appears to have been defeated this year and is unlikely to pass. But again, it has come back now 2 years in a row. And we'll see what happens in future years. Second to last bill I'm going to talk about, HB 1466/SB 891. Tell your sons, daughters, daughter-in-laws, sons-in-laws about this one. The accessory dwelling units would make it harder if it's passed for any local county or zoning jurisdiction, city or town, to make it harder to put an accessory dwelling unit on a house, on a parcel of land that already has a single family home. Now, when I say accessory dwelling unit, think a guest house, think in-law suite, think a separate apartment. There are some counties and cities in Maryland that take a very restrictive approach to these cases and don't like them. Annapolis thinks, rightly or wrongly, that making these accessory dwelling units or ADUs easier to build and buildable in more zoning districts will help solve the state's housing shortage. In St. Mary's County, which tends to have a fairly permissive view towards ADUs, I don't think this bill will have much of an effect. It might help out some marginal cases or on a case-by-case basis where say I've got like a setback from the street or your property lines that might have to be abided by. It might have some implications for that. By and large, it won't change much in St. Mary's County on my read. Typically, what gets in the way of an ADU in St. Mary's County is a lack of public water and sewer or the ability to put in your private water and septic. This bill would not change anything that has to do with that. So most of your cases in St. Mary's, denials will still probably have to be denied because of the lack of adequate public facilities. But again, I can see some cases where it might help out. Somebody who wants to put guest quarters or in-law suite or an apartment on their house in St. Mary's. Last bill I'll mention, and I'll give credit to Rowena, she called me this one for whatever reason. I go to the General Assembly's website and I showed, give me all the bills coded as those being of coded for affecting either our senior citizens or our benefits or our elder laws. 28 bills came up. This somehow was not one of them, but Rowena gave me enough heads up that I've been able to look up to it before we got here. HB 424/SB 357, the Lowering Prescription Drug Costs for All Marylanders Now Act 2025. And actually a big one that, again, it's not the type of bill that I would normally track, but in the last 10-15 minutes, been able to pull up the text to read the fiscal and policy note that came onto it. This would allow the Maryland Prescription Drug Affordability Board, the first prescription affordability drug board in the country, established in 2019, to set upper payment limits for any prescription drug that is either directly paid for by the state of Maryland, that is paid for as part of a health insurance plan of the state of Maryland or a unit of the state of Maryland, which would include the county health insurance plan, which would include teachers' systems or Board of Education insurance plans. So it's bought from one of those plans, or category 3, any prescription drug bought through the state's Medicaid program, which is probably where you're going to see most of its applicability to seniors come in, that these plans would just not be able to set, it would tell the prescription drug manufacturers that if you're going to sell this drug in Maryland, then you're going to sell it to plans covered by these three groups, and these insurance plans or Medicaid will not pay more than this amount for it. Understandably, it's a controversial bill. It's gotten a lot of talk on it. I pulled two letters, witness letters that came up that I think are illustrative. On the one hand, the Maryland Chamber of Commerce opposes strenuously on a theory that, while well-intentioned, a bill like this will stifle innovation and discourage both manufacturers and providers from locating in Maryland. Strenuously in favor of the bill, unsurprisingly, is the AARP and its chapters here in Maryland, who say that a bill like this is necessary in economically uncertain times and times of raising costs to make sure that all senior citizens have affordable access to prescription drugs, especially those senior citizens who are on fixed incomes who cannot easily react to dynamic market conditions where the price of prescription drugs can fluctuate, most certainly where it could increase substantially year over year. So that's my spiel as far as prepared remarks go. Again, I will get this list out. I'll add Rowena's bill to it, and I will email that out to Mercedes when I get back in front of the computer. So I would expect to see that sometime this evening, but more likely tomorrow morning. If you all have any questions about any of the bills that I just ran through, about anything else pertaining to the legislation or affairs in the General Assembly right now, all yours. This is by far my favorite part of the job, so I will welcome any chance to talk about it more than I just did, although I'm sure I've used your patience longer than anticipated already.
No, thank you so much.